Today we're going to talk about two different kinds of sanders, and so when we get into class next week, you're going to be working with practicing sanding and finishing of different surfaces. The two kind of sanders that we have in our shop area are both sometimes called palm sanders, but there's two pretty big differences. This is actually your traditional palm sander. It usually has a square base to it, and it's a pretty straightforward little device. Basically, very simple as far as how you operate it. The on-off switch is here, and you flip it on, and what this pad does is it begins to vibrate back and forth. And with the sandpaper on there, then it'll begin to sand. But it fits nicely in your palm, and that's why it's considered and called a palm sander. The other kind of sander that we're going to work with is a similar device, except it has a round base. And so this is called an orbiting sander. Some people will call it a palm sander, but it is actually an orbiting sander. And so basically this base, when you turn it on the same way, spins, and basically there's differences for different applications. Orbiting sander works great on flat surfaces and working through like even this bench top and that sort of thing. That spinning action is going to allow it to take off a fair amount of material pretty quickly. The palm sander is great for fine finishes and finishing something off because of the action it does. Also good in a lot of other applications such as drywall and some of that kind of stuff. And so there's some differences in how they work, but very similar. And so what we're going to do is Kevin's going to help me, and we're going to go ahead and show you how to replace the sandpaper on both machines, start it up and sand with it really quickly. You'll see that both sanders have dust catching bags. And so the idea is that they will somewhat collect a little bit of the dust so you don't have quite as much floating out into the air and you're not breathing as much dust. But you'll see that there's holes in both the pad and the sandpaper. And so the idea is if you line those holes up, then that dust will collect up inside the sander and in the bag. And so that's what those holes are for and what it's there for. But to change the sandpaper on the palm sander, you'll see that there's these two little levers, and those levers, when Kevin moves them up and down, they move a little piece right here, okay? And what Kevin's going to do is he's going to leave it in the down position. He's going to go ahead and take his sandpaper, and he's going to feed that right up in that front, if we can hold it. He's going to feed it up into there, and then let that clip and snap into position. And then you'll flip it over and do the same thing on the bottom side. Sometimes easier to take the dust collector off. It's also easier for you all to see. So you'll fold that up. Lock it down and lock it in. You'll see where these just kind of lock. They've got a little groove that they sit in, and that's all there is to it. If you flip it up on the bottom side, you'll see that his holes are lined up, and so the dust collection will work. And that's how you do that. Put your bag back on, and it just kind of slides on and snaps into place. To put the orbiting one on, it's even easier. The orbiting sander has a Velcro pad, and basically you just line your holes up and you can stick that on there. A word of caution as you look at some of these sanders, you will have students who will like to sand the paper way off or different things like that, and the Velcro tends to get worn off and they don't necessarily stick. There is a replacement that you can buy that's really inexpensive. You don't have to get rid of the whole sander. Just buy a new Velcro replacement and go from there. From here, Kevin's going to go ahead and sand. Just kind of show you how both of these work. That you'll want to be sure is that the machine is in the off position when you plug it in. And so when you go ahead and plug that in, make sure it's off. Now that it's plugged in, just push that button, slide that power button over to turn on, and you can see how that I don't know how you can see how that is vibrating and stuff. And so Kevin's going to sand with the grain. Now, that's the basics of using that sander. When you're done, you shut it off. Make sure it stops before you set it down. The orbiting sander is a similar operation. Push the button. You'll see how that spins in that circular motion, and it still kind of has a little bit of a vibrate motion. And you can see Kevin go up and down on that one. Again, before you set it down, make sure it comes to a complete stop. You can set it back down, unplug it, make sure that if you're making any adjustments, it's unplugged when you're doing it. And that's the basics of the two sanders.